So we saw before that we could create variables like this inside the setup function, and then we could return them at the bottom so we can output them in the template over here. Now, what happens if we try to change these variables? For example, when we click on this button. Well, let's give this a whirl. I'm going to say the name is now equal to Luigi. Now, if I save this, when we click on this button, it's going to update the name variable, but will it update in the template? Well, let's take a look. Click me. And no, it doesn't. It's still Mario. And the reason is because these by default are not reactive variables, meaning when they change, it will not automatically update those values in the template. Now, in contrast to this, before, when we used the data function in the options API, we returned an object like this, and then we could use properties, for example, score. And if that value changed at whatever point and we output it to the template, it would also change in the template. So this is a different behavior so far. And this is because these values inside the data function, they are reactive by default. And that means that when they change, Vue will react to that by updating them in the template. These are not reactive by default. So we need a way to make reactive values inside the setup function to do something similar. Now, there are two ways to do that, but the one I prefer most of the time is to use refs. And we've seen briefly in the last tutorial how we use a ref. However, back then we used it to get a template reference. We can also use refs to create reactive values, and that is what I use them for 99% of the time. So let's see how this works. What I'm going to do is surround these values right here with a ref like this. And remember, in order to use ref, we have to import it from Vue. And I'm going to do the same thing with the age down here. And then I'm going to change these let to constants. And just because these are constants, it doesn't mean that these values can't change. It just means that the reference object is a constant, but the value inside it can change. And remember, we get the value of a ref by saying the name of the ref, then .value, okay? So in this case, that would be Mario. If we said age.value, it would be 30. So these now are reactive values. When we use ref to surround a value, it becomes reactive. So what I'm doing now is still returning name and age down here. And when I return a ref like this, I can output it as data like this. And that will output Mario and 30 for the age. We don't have to say name.value here or age.value, much like we would inside this setup function to get the value of those. When we return a ref, which is a reactive value, we can just output them and it automatically outputs the value of that ref. Okay, so let's just see if this works first of all. I'm going to get rid of that as well. I'm just going to make sure that these are output correctly. So I'm going to save it and we should see Mario and 30 still. And we do. Let's just refresh in case. Yep, Mario and 30. So this is still working. Everything seems the same so far. All we've done is surrounded those values in refs and they still work up here. Now, the difference now is that we can change these values, and when we change them, it will update in the template because now these are reactive. Refs are reactive values. So how do we do this? I don't just say name is equal to Luigi like we did before, because name is actually a ref. So what I do is I grab the name value, which is Mario, and now I can just update that. I could set it equal to Luigi. And I could do the same thing for the age. I could say age.value and set it equal to something else like 35. So now we're updating the values of these refs. And because refs are reactive, when they update like this, they're going to update in the template as well. So let me save this and try it out. Click me. And now we see Luigi and 35. So this is now a bit more like when we used the data function down in the options API, because whenever the values of these things change, it's updated anywhere they are used in the template. So when we're using data that's output in the template, we generally use refs when using the composition API and the setup function. And that way they are reactive values and view will essentially watch them for changes and update the template when needed. Now don't worry if this all seems a bit confusing for now. We will be using refs this way a lot, so it will all drop into place as we use them more. So let's just build on this example a little bit. What I'm going to do is come down to the bottom and I'm going to create an input field, because we can also use vModel to bind to ref values like this, much like we could to properties inside the data function. So I'm going to create a vModel and set it equal to the name. So again, we don't say name.value here, we just say name. We only use the value property inside the setup function itself, because the variable is the ref, not the value. But outside in the template, we don't need .value. It automatically proxies the value up when we use the name of the variable. So now I'm using a vModel on this input and setting it equal to name. So when I type into this, it's going to update the value of this, and therefore in turn, it's going to update over here. So let me save this and try it out. I'm going to now type in here something else, and you can see as I delete, it updates, and as I type, it updates. Awesome. Let's also add on another button, and I'll do that just below this first button. And I'm going to add a click event to this. So I'll say @click and set it equal to something. Now I'm not going to reference a function. I'm just going to do the JavaScript directly in here. And all I'm going to do is take the age variable that we have, and I can say ++ to add one to it. Again, we don't need to say age.value++, because in the template, we don't use the value property. Inside the button, I'll just say add 1 to age. I'm going to save this and see if it works. And if I click this, we can see age going up. So that's the basics of how we can use refs as reactive values. And again, we will be using them an awful lot as we go forward.